My name is Angela, and I'm 28 years old. I run an online business from home, and I've been doing it for a few years now. It's been tough, but I've managed to make it work. I've always been independent, even though my family never really understood what I do. When my grandfather passed away 3 years ago, he left me something important: our family house. He had transferred the house to my name before he passed. It was his way of making sure I was taken care of. But little did I know, this gift would cause more problems than I ever imagined. My parents weren't happy about it. They always favored my older sister, Michelle, and they made it clear that they thought I didn't deserve the house. Michelle, well, she never really needed anything. She was always doing fine, living her perfect life, while I was stuck managing everything at home after Grandpa passed away. I was the one taking care of things while they just carried on with their lives. Then came the most unexpected challenge: Mark's mom, Linda. Linda is the type of person who thinks she's entitled to everything. Ever since Mark and I got married, she's always been a little controlling. At first, I tried to be nice. I didn't want to cause any trouble. But things got worse when Linda found out about the house. She started dropping hints about how hard things were for her. She told Mark that she needed help, that the family was struggling, and that I should give up the house. She said it would be the right thing to do, that the family needed it more than I did. She didn't even know what I had worked through to get where I was. It didn't matter to her. Mark told me it would be a good idea to help out. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. The house was mine. My grandfather left it to me, and now they were asking me to give it up for their sake? I refused. The money I had saved wasn't just for them. I had plans, big plans, for my business. The argument started small, but it grew bigger every day. Linda became more persistent, even guilt-tripping me when we were all together. I felt trapped in my own home, and it didn't help that Mark started siding with his mom. Every time I tried to stand my ground, it felt like I was losing him to her. At one point, Linda pulled Mark aside, and they talked behind my back. The next morning, I woke up to a message from Mark asking if we could talk. It was clear that my refusal had caused a serious divide. I felt hurt, confused, and angry. How had things gone so wrong so fast? Why did my family, my husband included, think I owed them everything? But I wasn't going to back down. The house was mine, and no matter how hard Linda tried to manipulate me, I wasn't giving it up. Not for her, and certainly not for anyone else. That was just the beginning. What happened next would change everything, and I had no idea how much my life was about to spiral out of control. The first time Linda came over after my refusal to give up the house, I knew things were about to get ugly. She smiled at me, but it was the kind of smile that didn't reach her eyes. I could tell she was plotting something. It made my skin crawl. Mark and I were sitting in the living room, going over some plans for my business, when Linda walked in without knocking. It was like she owned the place. She didn't even greet me, just went straight to Mark. "Mark, I think it's time we talk about the house again," she said, her voice soft but firm. I could feel my heart start to race. I had tried to keep the peace, but Linda wasn't about to let this go. I glanced at Mark, but he avoided my eyes, his face tense. "Mom, we've been through this," Mark replied. "Angela's not ready to make that decision yet." Linda didn't take no for an answer. "But we've been struggling, Mark. The bills are piling up, and you know your father and I aren't getting any younger. Angela's got everything she needs, and she's not even using the house. You have to talk some sense into her." The pressure was on. It was clear she was trying to make me feel guilty, but I wasn't about to give in. "I have plans for the house, Linda," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "It's not just a property. It's part of my future." But Linda wasn't listening. She turned to Mark, acting like I wasn't even there. "Mark, you know your mother and I are only asking because we care about the family. Angela's got plenty of money and no kids to worry about. You should talk to her. Tell her what's right." Mark sighed, looking at me with that familiar mixture of guilt and frustration. "Maybe it would help if we talked about this more, Angela." I shook my head.
"No, Mark.
"I'm not giving up the house. This is mine, and I've worked hard for everything I've achieved. I don't owe anyone anything." Linda's face twisted with anger. "You're selfish, Angela. All we're asking is for a little help, and you can't even be bothered to share your good fortune with the family? You're not the only one who needs something. I stood up, my hands shaking with anger. This is my inheritance. My grandfather left it to me, and I'm not going to give it up just because you're pressuring me. You don't get to decide what's best for me. Mark opened his mouth to speak, but before he could say anything, Linda stormed out of the room, muttering under her breath. I sat down again, feeling a mix of exhaustion and frustration. I wanted to keep things calm, but it felt like I was drowning in their demands. The days that followed only got worse. Every time Linda saw me, she'd throw another comment my way. You should be doing the right thing, Angela. It's not about the money, it's about family. It wasn't just Linda anymore. Mark was starting to see things her way. He wasn't openly siding with her, but I could feel it. Every conversation we had felt distant, like we were on different sides of a huge divide. I didn't want to lose him, but I also couldn't let him or anyone else make me feel guilty for standing up for myself. One evening, when Mark came home late from work, I tried to talk to him. Why are you letting your mom do this? Why can't you see that she's manipulating us? He looked tired, like he hadn't slept in days. I'm just trying to keep the peace, Angela. This is important to my family. Don't you understand that? I took a deep breath, fighting back tears. I understand that you're being manipulated, but you're not seeing it, Mark. Linda doesn't care about me or my future. She just wants what I have. He didn't respond, and that silence spoke louder than anything else. I had made my decision. I wasn't going to give in, no matter how hard they tried to push me. But deep down, I knew the battle was far from over. Linda wasn't the type to let something go. And now that she had Mark on her side, I had a feeling things were going to get even more difficult. The pressure was mounting, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could hold on. It was the weekend when everything truly fell apart. I had hoped that maybe things would settle down after the argument with Mark and his mom. But when Linda called the next day, demanding that I meet her for lunch, I knew it was far from over. I arrived at the restaurant, my stomach tight with dread. Linda was already sitting at a corner table, sipping her coffee, acting like nothing had happened. As soon as I sat down, she flashed me that same fake smile, the one that didn't hide the real intentions behind her words. Angela, I've been thinking, she began, setting her cup down slowly. Maybe you don't understand the gravity of the situation. This house, it's more than just property to your family. It's a legacy. Your grandfather would want us to all work together to keep it in the family. Don't you think so? I could feel my blood start to boil. She wasn't even pretending anymore. She was pushing harder, like she had a right to make decisions for me. But I wasn't going to back down. I don't need your approval, Linda, I said firmly. I'm not giving up my house. I'm not giving you or Mark what you want. It's mine. Her smile faltered for a moment, but then she leaned in, her voice low and icy. You think you can just hold on to it forever? The house is the only thing that's keeping Mark's family afloat, Angela. You're a part of this family now. You owe it to us. I shook my head, a cold laugh escaping my lips. I don't owe anyone anything, especially not after everything you've said and done. I've worked for everything I have, and I'm not just going to hand it over because you think it's your right. Linda's face hardened, and the tension in the air grew thick. You'll regret this, Angela. You're making a huge mistake. I don't care how much money you have or how successful you think your business is. In the end, it's family that matters. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Family? The same family that had ignored me, treated me like I was invisible, and now wanted to take what was mine? I stood up, slamming my hands on the table. I don't care what you think, Linda. I'm done with this. You can't control me. I'm not giving up the house, and I'm not backing down. So get out of my life. Her face twisted with anger, but she stayed calm, too calm. You're making a big mistake, Angela. Don't think I won't do whatever it takes to make you see things my way. With that, she got up and walked out of the restaurant, leaving me shaking with frustration. I was done. I couldn't keep fighting her alone, but I wasn't going to let her win. I had already made up my mind. No matter what it took, I wasn't giving in. Later that night, Mark and I had another heated discussion. This time, I could feel the distance between us like never before. He was on Linda's side now, whether he admitted it or not. And every word he said, every attempt to make peace, just made me feel more isolated. "You're pushing me too far, Angela," he said, his voice quiet but firm. "You don't understand what this means for my family." I felt my heart break a little more with each word. "I understand just fine, Mark. You're asking me to give up everything I've worked for. And for what? So Linda can control everything? I can't do that. I won't do that." His eyes narrowed, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of something else. Resentment. It hit me like a punch to the gut. "Maybe it's better if you just left, Angela. You've made your choice." The words stung, and I could barely process them. Was he really telling me to leave? Was I really about to lose everything for standing up for myself? "I'm not leaving," I said quietly, my voice trembling. "But maybe you should think about where your loyalties really lie." I turned and walked out, leaving him standing there. The house, my business, everything I had built was on the line. But if it came down to my family or my self-respect, I was choosing myself. The following days were filled with silence and tension. I could feel the coldness from Mark growing with each passing hour. And Linda? She was relentless, sending texts, making calls, trying to wear me down. But I was done. I wasn't going to lose who I was just to keep peace in a family that had never treated me right. My grandfather had trusted me with the house, and I wasn't going to let Linda or anyone else take it from me. But as I stared out the window that night, I knew this wasn't going to be easy. The battle wasn't over, and I was only beginning to realize just how far they would go to try and take what was mine. And I wasn't ready to give up yet. It had been a few weeks since the last confrontation with Linda, and the silence in the house was deafening. Mark and I barely spoke anymore. He was distant, and I could see the weight of his loyalty to his mother pulling him further away from me. The tension between us was suffocating, but I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't keep living like this. One morning, I woke up early, feeling more determined than I had in a long time. I wasn't going to lose myself in this battle anymore. I had made my choice, and it was time to act on it. It was time to take control of my life and my future. I called a lawyer. I needed to make sure that the house remained mine, no matter what Linda or anyone else tried. I knew that if I didn't take action now, I might lose everything I had worked so hard for. The lawyer, a kind woman named Sarah, listened carefully to my situation. "You have every right to keep your inheritance, Angela," she said, reassuring me. "Your grandfather's will is legally binding. If your mother-in-law is trying to claim the house, you have the law on your side." That was all I needed to hear. I wasn't going to be bullied out of what was rightfully mine. We began the paperwork, and I prepared for whatever was to come. That evening, I sat down with Mark after dinner. It was time to have the conversation I had been avoiding. "Mark, we need to talk," I said, my voice steady, but filled with emotion. He looked up from his plate, clearly tired but unwilling to engage. "What now, Angela?" "I'm filing for divorce," I said, my heart racing. "This isn't working anymore. I can't be with someone who chooses his mother over his wife. I've tried to make this work, but I won't live my life feeling like I'm being torn apart between you and your mom. I've already made my choice." Mark's face fell, and for the first time, I saw a flicker of regret in his eyes. But it was too late. The damage had been done. He hadn't stood up for me when it mattered, and I couldn't stay in a marriage where I wasn't respected. "I don't want this, Angela," he said, his voice low. "But I guess I've lost you." "You didn't lose me, Mark. You let me go," I replied softly, feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. "I can't stay in a marriage that isn't built on trust and respect. And I can't let your mother dictate my life any longer." I left the house that night, staying at a friend's apartment for a few days while everything was sorted out. The lawyer filed the necessary papers, and within a month, my divorce was finalized. It wasn't easy, and it hurt more than I expected, but it was the right choice for me. With the divorce behind me, I focused on my business and my future. I used the inheritance to invest in expanding my company, turning it into something I had always dreamed of. I was no longer holding on to the past or the toxic relationships that had weighed me down. Months later, I found a new apartment that felt like my own space, a place where I could breathe freely without the constant pressure of others. My business flourished, and I finally started to see the fruits of my hard work. One day, as I was walking home from a meeting, I passed by my old house, the house that had caused so much pain. I smiled to myself. It was still mine. It wasn't just the house. It was a symbol of my independence, of my journey to reclaim myself. Then, unexpectedly, I saw Mark standing in front of the house. He was looking at it, lost in thought. He turned when he saw me, and for a moment, we just stood there, looking at each other. "I never thought it would come to this," he said quietly. "I know," I replied, my voice calm. "But I had to do what was best for me." He nodded, his expression filled with sadness. "I'm sorry, Angela. I should have stood by you." I felt no anger, only a quiet sense of peace. "It's too late for apologies, Mark. But I wish you the best." We stood in silence for a moment longer before I turned and walked away, feeling lighter with every step. I was moving on. The past was behind me, and I was free.